I was expecting applause when I got up here. It's so quiet. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Thanks for being with us here tonight. I hope you're all enjoying your evening this far. I'm Terry Q, the Fellowship Director here at the Fine Arts Work Center, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the fifth and final Fellows Showcase this season. If you've attended any of this year's showcases, you know how impressive the exhibitions and readings have been. And tonight, in the gallery and soon on the stage, will be no exception. This evening, we celebrate the fine art of 4 exceptional creatives, including 2 visual arts fellows with captivating exhibitions in our Hudson D. Walker Gallery. It's that time of the evening where we show them some love. Let us all please take a moment to recognize and congratulate these 2 artists, Tess Oldfield and Michael Wolf. If you will, please stand. Yeah, Michael! All right. Congrats on your magnificent showcase, and thank you both for sharing your work with us. Please go check it out and spend some time with their work if you haven't already. This evening, we're also very fortunate to take in readings by 2 standout emerging writers, poetry fellow Pio Arango and fiction fellow Connor Greer. They'll be reading in that order and welcomed to the stage by a member of their cohort. So let's get to it. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage fiction fellow Robbie Herbst, who will introduce our first reader.
Hi, everybody. As a fiction writer, I find poetry an often confounding genre. For one thing, I've never gotten a satisfying answer to the question, what is a poem? I asked this question early in the fellowship, and an unnamed writing fellow responded that anything is a poem. While I'm sure this is true, I'm not sure it's very helpful. What I've determined for sure is that a poem has line breaks with meaning embedded within them, although there are exceptions to even that. The question of the nature of poetry is one that arises when I read Pio Arango's work. I have no doubt that they are properly poems, although one can easily imagine them without the line breaks as little gems of stories, and they'd be very effective. As poems, though, they have a certain glimmer, the excitement of holding your breath to better listen to the noises deep within the forest. By breaking his lines and thus creating poetry, Pio conditions narrative into a rhythm, something you could set to music or chant. So I think a definition for a poem, or at least for Pio's poems, might be a story that's been made into a song. The poems Pio is reading tonight come from a collection he completed while at FOC, titled At the Border. I've been lucky to spend time with the completed work. These are poems of restraint. If you know Pio, that checks out. Pio frequents the fiction writer's weekly meeting. One time, he expressed concern that his use of a single metaphor in a poem was too indulgent. I hurried to reassure him that not only was it not indulgent, but beautiful and necessary for the poem. I could see that he wasn't still convinced. In fact, Pio rarely uses figurative language. The clear, direct tone of his poetry is like a spell cast on the reader. The occasional metaphor, then, hits with greater force. Pio rations his metaphors only because he respects their power. The subject matter of the poems you will hear tonight draw from war refugee narratives, childhood and the family, young love, and the natural world. Animals make frequent appearances, though they are rarely symbolic or aphoristic. They appear instead as agents in the human drama, giving testimony to human cruelty and providing a mirror to our instinctual peregrinations. These poems have the humor only someone who is serious about living can express. They have qualities that seem so rare today: grace, wisdom, elegance, timelessness, qualities I might ascribe to Pio if I wanted to embarrass him. His work is not purely an excavation of the self, but artful arrangements of experience and insight that might capture something grander. Often the poems end at the border and with an unexpected caress or a twist of the knife. It's impossible not to reread them. One other crucial difference between narrative and poetry is that the latter so smartly resists summary. And for that reason, I must now shut up and let Pio and his brilliant work speak for itself.
Thank you, Robbie, for that incredible intro. That was too kind. Thank you. No, that was really great. I'm so amped. I wanted to start off by thanking the staff here at the Fine Arts Work Center. These past 7 months have been so wonderful, and I'm just so appreciative for my time here. Thank you also to my cohort. Yeah, we've had some really great times, and I can't wait to see you all in the outside world. Yeah. And also a special thank you to my friends who traveled all the way out here to support me tonight. Thank you so much. Well, I'm not too much of a talker, so I won't probably say very much in between the poems. But for a little bit of context, these first 3 poems are told from the voice of someone living in the country of Laos around the time of the most recent war there, known as the Secret War. And this took place in the 1960s and 70s alongside the Vietnam War. The first poem I'll be reading tonight is titled Kitchen Table, Dusk. After the war, there was cleaning to do. I worked collecting bombs. Their tails, exposed, had rusted, though their buried parts remained quite fresh. We bartered the aluminum scraps with village blacksmiths, who in turn fashioned them into jewelry or tableware. Some of the bombs were defective and did not explode on impact. They rest now, undetected, beneath the earth. Do you remember how during the war we were constantly scanning the sky for planes, or listening for their low purr on the evening breeze? There was no use in running. Instead, we sat around a candle, waiting for the blasts to draw closer. I was just a child then. Everyone I loved sat at that table. As for my earrings and bracelets, they're as light as bone. I wear them even to bed. Landscape with craters. During the monsoon months, they become shallow pools. Somehow, the village children have convinced themselves fish inhabit these waters, though the most they ever caught was a Coca-Cola can. Peace has made them foolish. Just last week, a boy climbed a coconut tree without a rope and broke his skull. My own son was once given a rifle and left under the quail moon. When he returned, it was in a dream, and he was young again. "Why have you been out so late?" I scolded him. "Night is falling." And it was true. Outside, I heard frogs croaking. "I'm thirsty," he said. "The rains hardly ever reach us in the other world, and the night lasts forever." Poor frogs, I thought. They must get no rest. At the border. After many days' travel, we came to the river, which divided a country at war from a country at peace. There, a young man was hired to ferry us in his wooden boat on a cloudy night so the gunmen wouldn't see us. After the river seeped in, it was then I realized I could not recall my life. Yet as we sank, I swam to save it. Okay, now I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. Yeah, thank you. This next poem is called Childhood Lawn. There is a slight depression by the edge of the driveway where melting snow each April pooled and froze over. One morning, brother slipped on the ice and broke his arm. That spring, father leveled the ground. The dirt he used was richer than the surrounding earth and produced a patch of greener grass, which tortured him. Mother was tortured by the earthworms that multiplied in the fresh soil and emerged onto the driveway after rain. They reminded her of her childhood in the camps. At first, you don't feel the tapeworms, she would tell us. You feel hunger, fatigue. Then bits of them appear, and you get a deeper feeling. I understood some of what she meant. Change was happening throughout my body. New voice, new face, new desires. The sum of this change would be a man. Then that man would become other men with other desires, though I didn't know this yet. I'll read a few animal poems. This first one is called Tiger. One day, Tiger felt the desire to become human and soon developed human tendencies. He searched for patterns in the weather and studied his image in still waters. He began also to suffer thoughts, which hindered his ability to hunt or sleep, and so he sought to quell his mind as the sages did, through seclusion, recitation of holy text, and a sparse diet of rice and water. Then on the 10th day, Tiger was dead. The silver carp. Before reincarnating, he spent an interim in heaven, a boundless pool of clear water cut by rods of golden light, wherein he washed his mind. The more he swam, the more he was confused. The light led to no surface and did not diminish with depth. Soon he doubted depth entirely, and back and forth, and in between, and then he was a deer. This next one is very short. It's titled A Study of Three Animals. A dragonfly is pierced through the abdomen and becomes a toy in a game the children call helicopter. The blind hen can't escape the little boy who loves to grab her, so she stays alive. The turtle retreats into his shell and is split open with the machete for turtle soup. Now it's time for some love poems. Yes. Prepare yourselves for the beloved. Yes. This poem is called An Ancient Outpost. The city's east walls are in ruins. Into the west, the land falls off in cliffs. We rest in the shade of an almond tree. My beloved picks almonds from its branches, cracks them open with a stone. Senti, he says, peeling back the shell and offering the fruit. What drove the Greeks to throw themselves from these cliffs? Pride? Fear of torture? Decree of the gods? No, I'm imagining things. That was the Japanese. That was Saipan. Sorry, I'm going to do those last two lines again. No, I'm imagining things. That was the Japanese. That was Saipan. My beloved is so beautiful eating almonds, it breaks my heart. Cooling off while hiking. My beloved stripped and lay back in a stream. Clear water skimmed his face and torso, and he remained motionless for quite some time. Years ago, I found that stranger in my father's casket and felt betrayed. Then my beloved rose from the water. Kio ke foi? He asked. It's nothing, I answered. He stood a moment in the sun. I touched his chest. It's cold, I said. Then he put his clothes on, and we continued up the mountain. Summer night in the city. You wake in the dark. No voices, no sirens, no nightmare in the recesses of your mind. Only the low whir of self-driving cars. And beside you, your beloved, who has thrown his shirt off in the heat. In the darkness, you feel contentment. Your whole life up until now, and whatever comes after, is worth it. All right, says your life. Remember that. This poem is titled, In My Youth, I Loved. I was on a train heading south. He was a stranger, returning home after years abroad. As we talked, the landscape changed. Arezzo, Roma, Napoli, Salerno, and in between, swaths of countryside. I sat facing the rear, so the past seemed clear to me. A row of hills blending together. He sat opposite. He saw the future. The closer we came to things, the more they blurred by. The sun traced a path and fell against his face. In my youth, I loved more easily than I ever will again. Then we hit darkness. The air became much heavier, or perhaps much lighter. We'd entered a tunnel he didn't foresee, obscured as it had been by the train. And when we emerged, I'd find no trace of it. Arezzo, Roma, Napoli, Salerno. Some things I know, but can't recall. Some faces are gone from my mind. Okay, I wanted to share a few poems inspired by my time here in Provincetown. This first one is titled Snowstorm Begins. After days in that cabin where nothing changed, not my endless pacing between 3 rooms, and not my useless thoughts, I put on running shoes and entered the woods. Snow hid the trails and wind blinded me, but I pushed through cold and underbrush until I had no thought but the body and its quick maneuvers, its cool sweat and huge breathing. Eventually, I lost sensation in my hands and feet, and up my legs, which somehow kept working, just kept going, and I didn't need all I'd once depended on. Not aim, not intellect, and certainly not feeling. This poem is called The Pier After Dark. Night fishers cast lines for squid, small, translucent creatures which in a bucket squirm and mix their ink. Sometimes children are playing. Tubarão, they shout. Tubarão. Sometimes a man docks the night boat. In the distance, freight ships anchor under floodlights, and a crane works tirelessly, hoisting and reconfiguring huge container boxes. In some parts of the world, there are houses made of such boxes, wherein, for a time, lives are contained. There are offices, schools, clinics, modular structures where events and dialogues repeat themselves, just as the squid repeat themselves. Tubarão, cry the children. This has always been their game, and so it will be for the children that come after. Do you get lonely? I asked the boatman. On the way back from that island. You do, he says, but you get used to it. This last Provincetown poem is titled We Raved All Night in the Underground. And at some point I slipped into a kind of trance, becoming in turns a string of thoughts, a string of data, a well of desire. I felt the shawl of my body around me, and around that, other bodies. In the strobes, I caught glimpses of myself, hand, shoulder, stills, lifted from a roll of film. Then everything turned red. You are a beautiful alien, a woman said into my ear, and it was so. Then she said something incoherent, and so it was also. Okay, I'm going to switch gears again. This next poem is called Mother's House. One day, Mother fell ill and lost her mind. I went to care for her, in her sick bed, in the house she had built, only to find she no longer recognized me. She spent her time either sleeping or in conversation with the south-facing window. You look beautiful today, she would say, or how could you do this to me? For weeks, her condition neither improved nor worsened. So the doctor suggested I talk to her in her sleep. I began to recount stories of hers from the old country. Humans and creatures traded forms, and spirits wandered the woods. During one such tale, I realized I hadn't slept in days. True sleep, the restorative kind, I could hardly remember. It was then I began to resent the stories, which had distracted us from the task at hand, the task of dying. Each evening, a film of ice crept over the window. It's not so bad, Mother said, watching the world shrink. Then, tell me again how it happened. I fell ill and lost my mind. Blue sky. We moved from city to city, each with its own seasons and languages, until finally we returned to where we'd spent those first years of our married life together. Antioquia. One afternoon, we hiked into the woods. The trails had shifted so that walking through them felt like walking through a dream. Eventually, we came to a pond, El Charco, we had called it. We lay down by its bank. I was still in love. The sky was a thin blue gradient. The longer I looked, the more I saw muted currents taking shape. Two crows passed over, and in my head I heard your heart beating. The world, in all its hues and textures, has been so very generous to me to imagine it all. I'll end with two short poems. This first one is divided into two sections, and it's called The End of Winter. 1. The lake is thawing, which means refuge for the green-winged teals. All through the night they descend to catch what little rest they can before instinct drives them further north. The light of the moon is broken by the water, which moves in the wind like a pool of eels. The ducks cry out to one another. We are one flock, they are saying. Or, just as likely, do not abandon me. 2. The sky grows lighter over the high mountain peaks. What's left now is my life, you think. From the dock, you saw great things in the night. To be here still means you've outlasted them. Flying into Vientiane, sunset. Small fires dot the landscape. Farmers burning refuse. With the fall harvest ending, water buffalo are free to roam the dry paddies. They must be returning now to their pens. So this is the homeland again, for the last time. It feels as though you have lived 2 lives. The life you were born into, and the life that came after. Soon, the buffalo will be made to walk in circles, grinding the crop. And the New Year's festival will begin. The old songs, night markets, children spinning tops. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to welcome the next introducer, Dominic Amarati.
All right. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. Thanks for being here. And yeah, I'm way more nervous for this than for my own reading for some reason. You know, if you let yourself down, who cares? But if you let your friend down, then it's really bad. So I thought I would keep this simple, and somehow keeping it simple for me ends up going back to like the dawn of the Enlightenment. What I'm going to do is give a little historical context that frames what. I'm introducing Connor Greer, I should say. I'm going to give a little historical context that frames what Connor is up to and explains why I find his writing so exciting. I'm not just flattered as his friend, but also proud as a fellow writer that he asked me to do this introduction. 5 minutes. I'll begin with a historical commonplace. Mystery, horror, and science fiction all began to consolidate as genres in the mid-19th and early 20th centuries. This was a period in which industrialization exploded and advances in medicine and science accelerated radically. These developments served as proof of concept for something that had been kicking around since the dawn of the Enlightenment, the primacy of reason. And yet, because we are human, we're never able to stay within the bounds of the objective, quote unquote, which is why stories of the strange, the inexplicable, and the weird all blossomed at that transition point 150 odd years ago, as writers pawed at the veil between the rational and the supernatural. Today, we, in the West, have arrived at another moment where the supernatural, which in the 20th century had remained tightly confined within the bounds of the well-limbed Christian God, has become loosed once again. We have arrived at another moment where technology has accelerated beyond our ability to comprehend it. Rather than locking us into a faith and reason, however, the opposite has occurred. Esoteric meanings proliferate, daily life tingles with occult forces, and we're only beginning to come to terms with this new world. People are finding the supra-rational in both the ancient and the computative, the quotidian and the fantastic. We somehow simultaneously want to believe nothing and believe everything as we track the arc of our exploration in an environment that increasingly resembles the dystopian scenarios of science fiction present and yore. It is that environment, that predicament, that arc form the ground of Connor's work. To be clear, Connor is not a supernaturalist, nor is he a genre writer. He's not writing horror, science fiction, or mystery. When he and I talk about books, we talk about people like Roberto Bolaño or Yasunara Kawabata. But Connor does bring to his work the sense of dread and the great unknown, as well as the kind of probing that we associate with the upheavals of the industrial age, not only in writers like Poe or Arthur Machen or H.G. Wells, but also with members of the decadent movement like Huysman and, on the other side of the Atlantic, the cosmic Melville. Really building you up here. Which is to say that there is a seeking going on in Connor's writing. On the surface, this seeking is that of poor bastards trying to scrape by in an exurban American landscape of basement dwellers and Christian colleges and half-empty strip malls. But just as urgent, lying beyond that material search, is a search for the answer to the larger question, the capital B, capital Q, big question that gnaws away at us all, if only we could figure out what that question actually is. The word that comes to mind when I was meditating on Connor's writing is numinous. It's a cheesy, flap copy word. But in this case, as you will hear for yourself in just a moment, the word is apt. The numen is traditionally a spiritual force lurking hidden in an object or place. With Connor, it's lurking in a situation, often a very abject one. It's there, not in some cavern or cathedral, where his tugging at the veil of reality takes place. Connor's prose tends to be clipped and spare. He uses matter-of-factness to create a sense of noirish anxiety. The mounting horror you feel as you read is the horror of being broke, or of using the toilet at your warehouse job, or of an old friend telling you a story that for reasons you do not understand rattles you to the core. A child prodigy raised in the church makes extraordinary paintings that give back to Christ an offering of her own body and blood. A jobless stoner finds himself near eviction outside a strip mall when a stranger, quote, like a naked mole rat, offers him a mysterious, lucrative job. One of Connor's stories begins, "It is my job to milk the cows of blood." The estrangement of Connor's stories is latched through with humor. After all, defamiliarizing the familiar can not only be disconcerting, but also funny. His work reminds me of Joy Williams, for the way that both writers manage to convey the lives of people, typically at the lower end of the economic spectrum, who find themselves in bizarre and urgent situations as the result of a decision chain that to them seems perfectly logical as they advance step by step into derangement, all the while looking for a rock on which to build their own odd church, trying to briefly banish the thought that hell may well prevail against them in the end. Without further ado, I'd like you to welcome to the stage a writer from Rochester, New York, 31 years old, about 73 inches tall, and weighing around 170 pounds, Connor Greer.
Hello. Can you all hear me? Thank you all for being here, like all of you. And thank you to Dominic for that amazing introduction. And to Pio and Michael and Tess and especially to Liv for flying all the way from Tokyo to be here. But really, yeah, everyone, thank you. I guess this is it. So just let's take a second. We're here. Yeah, I love you all. All right, so this is a short story. I wrote it here. It's not exactly finished, but that's okay. It's called A Mountain. I found work on a container ship bound for the other side of the world. I scrubbed toilets and urinals and mopped the long white hallways. I gathered dishes and cups and forks and spoons from the cafeteria and loaded them into industrial machines which cleaned them, and then I slotted them back into the large metal bins from which they would be taken again in the morning. I slept in a room with 5 other men. Each had his own job. We played cards. We drank. We imagined the lives we had each just left, and we experienced our uncertainty together as to the journey we were taking and why we were taking it, and whether it was towards nowhere, whether nowhere was a place or whether it was a place in the mind. I learned to sleep with my eyes open. I learned to find feeling in work that was worse than bad. We gathered together to watch the sun cross over the edge of the horizon line and to watch sweating men unload what we carried. We played the radio and sang the songs with new words that didn't make any sense, and drunk beyond belief, we laughed until we fell asleep and woke up suspicious and sour-hearted and then did it all again. In Yokohama, I fled the ship with my wages in an envelope tied against my chest. I spent the first night in a room in Chinatown. The bed was round and large and surrounded by mirrors on all sides. Mirrors on the walls, mirrors on the ceiling. The bed was connected to an electric motor, and when I touched the button, it started to spin. I looked up at my rotating body. It looked back down at me. Behind the curtains, there were no windows. I found a hostel where foreigners stayed, and a tanned man smoking an unfiltered cigarette showed me a corkboard with advertisements for farm jobs. I picked berries and planted rice. I drank with elderly farmers and looked up at the stars. I spoke no Japanese. I took the highway bus from town to town and from city to city and slept with my face pressed up against the glass. The work slowed when winter came. The hostels filled with young, rootless men. The capsule rooms had a nautical quality. There were control panels to dim the lights, to open the exhaust vents. I ate and drank from the convenience stores. I avoid staying more than 2 nights in one place. I made my way back to Tokyo and then north to Niigata. In some towns, I was the only foreigner, and the hostels were filled with salarymen and college students, and they took me to izakayas and fed me drinks until I woke up in my bed with the linens tucked in around me and my companions snoring in their soiled suits. I tried to slip out before they woke. In Sendai, 2 Frenchmen took me to a bar in a basement where the bottles behind the counter were spaced out with lava lamps, which sent an alternating orange and red glow across and through the transparent liquor bottles. The proprietor kept his hair in a mop top that mushroomed out above his long, pencil-thin sideburns. 2 men wearing sunglasses ordered around for everyone. When they smiled, their teeth glowed red and orange. A vinyl of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band played on a turntable behind the bar. When we were drunk, one of the men pushed his sunglasses up against his forehead and took me aside. The man asked me if I knew anything about sculpture. His black hair glistened. He told me the gallery he worked for represented a sculptor up in the mountains. He had just returned from an exhibition in Paris, and he was desperate to learn French. Would I be interested in teaching him? I told him I was. I didn't speak any French. It was a long climb up steep, switch-backed roads. At the top, the valley spread out in front of me, and I could see cars passing between the snow-covered rice paddies and the clay-tiled roofs and wide eaves of buildings at the edges of the small town I had come from. Breathless, I walked along the tree-lined roads before it flattened out into a clearing. There was a stone hut tucked between the trees. In front of it, wide sheets of metal, interconnected as one structure, leaned against itself in the snow, as tall as the hut, or the first story of a house, conjoined together as if by magic, curving shell-like, the sky reflecting on and in the curved metal panels. For a moment, looking through the gap formed at its topmost point, a circle which opened from the rippling metal like an eye. The colors of the sky and the metal seemed to each bleed into the other. From between the metal sheets emerged a man, short and disheveled, in a dirty set of one-piece pajamas, a cigarette held between his teeth, the sculptor. There was a mat he slept on. He boiled tea in a wood-burning stove. The hut had no exhaust, and the smoke billowed out of the logs and filled the room. He gestured with his hand to stay low, below the smoke. We sat hunched and drank the tea. The sculptor spoke rapidly, and I didn't understand anything he said. He didn't wait, and he didn't explain. He lit another cigarette. I couldn't stop coughing. He pointed at the ground with the cigarette, in the corner, at the bare stone, at what looked like a rag. He let the ash fall where it would. Then he pointed at me. He smiled. He rubbed his shoulders. Cold. He woke with the sunrise and rekindled the fire. He cooked rice and ate it with canned meat, talking to himself. He had a habit of flicking the back of one hand with his other hand. When he stepped out to work, I ate what was left of the rice. I stayed low, below the smoke. He made no introductions, gave no tour. I emerged from the hut and watched him work. A sheet of metal lay on a bed of maybe 10 or 15 tree stumps. He hit it with wide hammers and then with increasingly narrow ones. He lit cigarettes and threw them to the ground, where they went out in the snow in brief, trailing lines of smoke. There was a bonfire next to him, smoldering. When it went out, he pointed at me, and I took logs from along the wall of the hut and threw them into it. He doused these with lighter fluid and tossed his cigarettes onto the pile. He worked until it was dark, the same motions over and over again. He waved me close to him and pointed at the metal. It was possible to see the shadow of the beginning of a curve. Behind the hut, there were two half-functioning mopeds. It was an hour ride downhill to the town, and the brakes whistled. There was a grocery store and a bar. I bought canned food and rice and put it in a basket on the back of the moped. I bought 3 cartons of cigarettes, a sleeping mat. The shopkeeper helped strap it on my back. He pointed at the mountain. Crazy, he said in English, tapping on my head, laughing. The snow gathered on itself. It accumulated. A man came from the gallery in a small, square pickup truck. He brought coats and snow pants and a new stack of metal sheeting. Each sheet appeared significantly smaller than anything I had seen the sculptor work with, and he shouted at the man from the gallery and then went into the hut and lay down on his mat. The man looked at me and shrugged. We wore the coats and the snow pants to bed. He stopped from time to time to walk between the edges of the sculptures in the clearing and look up into the sky. At other moments, he leaned down under the sheet he was working on and studied the way the edge cut against the blue above us. When he was done with a portion of a sheet, it became my job to smooth out the lines which rose to the surface as the metal shrank, how it folded over and glinted in the sunlight while he worked on the next. I lost the feeling in my fingers. He shit in the woods, in the snow. I shit in the woods, in the snow. We both smelled like it. I stopped coughing. A flatbed truck and a team of men came with pulleys and levers. They lifted the sculpture from the clearing onto the truck, covered it with tarps, and strapped it to the truck bed, leaning it towards the cab. The men paid the sculptor with envelopes of cash. He didn't speak. He watched them slowly and steadily drive the trucks out of the clearing and creak carefully down the switchbacks until they disappeared from view. We rode into town to celebrate. The sculptor sat at the red-painted counter in the bar next to 2 middle-aged women in powdered makeup. The women lit his cigarettes and brought him whiskey. He gave them 10,000 yen note after 10,000 yen note. It's about $66. And they touched his shoulders and stroked his cheeks. I sat in the corner and watched. One of the women came over and offered me a cigarette. I didn't take it. Eventually, the sculptor passed out at the bar, and the women and the owner rummaged through his pockets for what was left of his money. They offered some of it to me, their fingers on their lips. They opened my jacket and tucked the bills into my pocket. I didn't stop them. Summer came. We worked until it was too hot to bear, and then we sat and smoked cigarettes in the hut. The darkness kept it cool. The sculptor spent full days looking into the sky. My arm went numb, working the metal. He measured the sheets with string, poured gasoline into an old generator and kick-started it to power a welding torch. I learned the different weights of the different implements and when to use one over another. We leaned the sheets of metal against each other. He tried to find the angle between the metal and the sky. When it looked right, he waved me down and pointed out the edge of the line, crouched in the dirt, his cheek nearly against mine. Every other week, I rode the moped to the store in town, at first silent and trembling, holding my feet straight off the sides, ready to catch myself from going over the lip, and then leaning my body against the handlebars, howling. The second winter was colder than the first. The snow bit at my ankles. I had forgotten the way the smoke lived inside me when I lived inside of it. We set up a structure of scaffolding, and the sculptor climbed these scaffolds in his boots, squinting, the torch in his hand. He wore no goggles, no gloves. The choice he made about the angle overwhelmed him. He stepped down from the scaffolding, threw the torch into the snow, and retreated again into the hut. I listened to him mutter and hit himself on the head with his palms. The angle was wrong. There was no easy way to fix it. I held him down on his mat to keep him from hitting his head against the stone. He jabbed his elbows into my sides. After the fit passed, he puked by the door to the hut and slept. I stepped out into the snow and looked up at the moon. I hated him. I paced around the scaffold. I ducked under it and hit my fist against the metal. I hit it again. I saw red, the lava lamp light reflecting in that bar, in the man's white teeth, in the setting sun over the Pacific, and then I kicked it. The pain was immediate. I screamed and slumped against the metal, clutching at my foot. The sculptor pulled me back inside the hut and held me until I fell asleep. In the grocery store, I took off my boot. The nail had fallen off. The blood had dried dark and waxy. The toe pointed in an odd angle away from the foot. The shopkeeper tapped his cheekbone with his index finger and wrote an address on a piece of paper. Outside, I met a young boy bundled so tightly I couldn't make out his face. He moved his arms up and down like wings. I showed him the note, and he led me to an old house. The snow continued to fall. Through the window, the lights inside were soft and yellow, and I could see a woman about my age sitting at a low table reading a book. She looked up at me. The young boy ran off. "So you are the Italian man," she said. I stood with my mouth open in the cold, with my mouth open in the cold, the door behind me, and looked at her through the open door. "Are you going to come in, Italian man?" "I have a broken toe," I said. I knelt in the foyer without shutting the door and began unlacing my boot. "I have to go back up the mountain," I said. She laughed. "I don't need to see your toe," she said. She stepped briefly inside the house and then returned with medical tape, cotton, and a pair of scissors. She wrapped them carefully in a piece of paper and placed them in a small box like a gift. She closed the rice paper doors between the foyer and the house and paused for a moment on the other side. We both stood there. I tried to keep perfectly still, my toe shaking. I wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. I heard her take a breath. "Write me letters," she said. And then I heard her footsteps back to the table. "Write me letters," she'd said. The sculptor rolled back and forth on his mat, muttering. Sometimes he shook me by the shoulders and spoke so urgently. Then he went silent, crawled back to his mat, and poked at the fire with the iron. At night, I watched him cry, his hands clenched over one another, and then I watched him laugh, holding his hands in just the same way. I used some of the money from the bar to buy paper, envelopes, and a pen. I wrote a letter to the woman, holding the paper up against the grocery store wall. When I finished and handed it to the shopkeeper, he laughed and pointed at himself, as though asking for me. The sculptor finished welding the metal, and we smoothed out the small portions that had bubbled, hanging from the scaffold like monkeys. Hammering and grinding, the cable strung over the metal beams, the generator belching smoke. I kept weight off my toe. I left letters for her every other week. "I am a man without a home," I wrote. "I live on top of a mountain. I have decided to become an artist. I don't know why." I listed facts like they would tell a story. What a ridiculous idea it had been from the start to exchange letters with a man without an address. Had I misheard her? I don't know how tall I am anymore. I don't know how much I weigh. I eat very little. When I do, I often don't know what it is. I miss dancing. Moments of transition troubled the sculptor. Beginnings, endings. He preferred to be deep in motion. It seemed that he preferred not to think about anything but the sky, as though to live had become for him the process of seeking out states in between, to reject life and yet to embody it, as a tree does, or a rat, a dog, a fish, a snake. I thought of this when I watched him pace around the scaffold. I thought of it, and briefly I admired him. She wrote back, in small, precise hand. The shopkeeper gave me her letter. I am a woman who just returned home, and now it doesn't feel much like home. I am from Japan. I live in a house with my father. I like to read and write poems. I also miss dancing. You are a strange man. Keep writing. We finished the sculpture, and the sculptor was inconsolable. The men from the gallery arrived again with their trucks, and he refused to come out of the hut. One of the men gave the money to me in a briefcase. When they left, I opened the briefcase and looked at the envelopes. I took 3 of them and put them in my jacket pockets and spread the others around so they looked even. I watched the sculptor sit again at that bar and give the women the envelopes without opening them, without checking how much was inside. A woman offered me a drink and then a cigarette. The curtains were dense over the windows. It was impossible to know the time of day. The sculptor's words were slurred, his voice hoarse. I thought of the young woman and the shopkeeper. I thought of her eyes in the dark foyer. I thought of the careful control of her writing on paper. I wondered if there was any reason at all why I was sitting there, watching this man kill himself. Smiling, he brought the small glass of whiskey to his lips. He allowed the liquid to fall quickly down his angled throat, and then he gagged and vomited down his chest and onto the bar. There was no reason, I thought. There was no reason I should be there at all. The women patted his head and dabbed at him with towels and napkins and handkerchiefs. The owner emerged from the back with a new shirt. They spoke in fawning tones. How much better he looked now, they seemed to say, in this nice white shirt. It went like this for several more hours. The sculptor drank and smoked until there were no more envelopes left, and then he stumbled to the floor. On his back, he pointed towards the ceiling forcefully again and again, laughing. It was time to go back up the mountain. I helped him to his feet. Outside, the snow was falling. He leaned on my shoulder. He whispered something in my ear. I couldn't make it out. For a moment, he pulled away and looked me in the eyes. He whispered it again. Then he gently hit me over the head, stumbled forward onto his moped, and set off. Only the sculptor's headlight worked. He swayed back and forth over the snow, and I followed its weaving gaze, the streetlights fading around me, replaced by the night, the road shifting upwards, the mountain, the sculptor careening to the left, to the right, forward along it, always forward, straining. I could hear the edges of his voice, bellowing out the lyrics to songs I didn't know. The road narrowed, and the sculptor struggled, quivering against the barrierless edge along the hairpin turns. The snow was deep, and our tracks were the first in it. All it would take was one slip. Under my breath, I whispered to myself, if I can just survive this, if I can only just survive this. In the night, the sculptor rolled onto his back, and he vomited again. His breath cut out. His arms twitched and shook. What did we owe each other, any of us? Did we owe more than to a tree, to a stone, to the shape of steel as it bent and broke and joined together under the heat of a fire? I crawled to him under the smoke and pushed him back onto his side, and he spat and groaned, his hair wet with sweat. I wiped my hands on my jacket and put another log on the fire. I lay shivering, the bitter smell cutting up from my fingers through the smoke. Was it kindness that we owed? Was it beauty? In the morning, the sculptor was gone. His vomit was dry on the stone floor. There were footprints in the snow leading out into the woods. The few objects in the hut looked untouched. The envelopes were still in my jacket pockets. I cleaned the vomit with a rag and prodded at the embers. I waited. I smoked a cigarette. I lay down on the sculptor's mat and put my head where he put his. I inhaled, my nostrils against the rough fabric. No new scent came to me. Night fell, and I stepped out under the stars. It was clear. The tracks were untouched. There was fresh snow the next morning. I climbed onto one of the mopeds and started the ride down the mountain. Slowly, my feet out to the sides, easing, balancing, the sunlight in my eyes, reflecting in the untouched white. At the second switchback, I lost control of it. I fell and rolled through the snow-covered gravel to the edge of the cliff. I heard the moped slip over, the crash. I didn't follow. My clothes soaked through with snow, my cheek cut, blood in the road, on my hands down onto my coat. I stood up and walked. The shopkeeper pulled me into the back room. He held my arm tight with his nails. "Crazy," he said, shaking his head, tightening his mouth. He opened and closed cabinets. The overhead light was fluorescent. The chair I sat in was wooden. He poured isopropyl alcohol onto a towel and held it burning against my face. He switched the sign over on the door, his hand on my shoulder. We walked towards a small, square car. I sat across from the woman on tatami, the table between us. We drank tea. She smiled without fear or shame. The heater was on. "I always knew when a letter came from you," she said, before I opened it. It smelled like smoke. The whole house smelled like smoke. In the spring, under the sakura, we married and took a long, winding train to Shikoku to live in an old house overlooking the inland sea. She took a job as a teacher. I repaired the house. I fitted new windows flush against the walls and looked at the sky through the glass between the edges of the clean metal frame. I built a kiln and a studio in the plot next door using scraps of wood, tree stumps, and pallets. I drove to recycle shops every month and spoke in slow, broken Japanese, asking them what they were throwing away, offering to take it. What I found, I arranged, I took apart, I put together in new ways. I melted plastic, I made additions out of clay. I looked out over the water, waiting to hear the sound of our small car when it pulled up next to the house. In the summer heat, I fire the kiln, stripped to nothing, soaked in sweat. I think back to that final night, standing in the snow, out in front of that wretched bar. I try to remember what he whispered so emphatically in my ear before our journey up the mountain, before his flight into the forest, and the edges of a word comes to me from his lips to my ear, a word which I don't know if I imagine now, or if it appears from a depth of memory only visible from a distance, a word which I knew nothing of then, not in any sense, but now find ringing out in my voice every morning and every night, like a gift I am startled by each time it is given. Thank you.
Wow. I've got knots in my stomach. I don't know why. Thank you, Pio and Connor, for those fantastic readings. Thanks for closing us out in such great fashion. And thank you, Robbie and Dominic, for those generous introductions. I have 3 quick announcements, and then I'll close us out with some remarks. Tess and Michael's shows in the Hudson D. Walker Gallery will be open or on view until Sunday, April 26th. Please spread the word. The gallery is open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and by appointment on the weekend. You can call or email us at register@falk.org to make an appointment. Next week, on Thursday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. in this room, we'll be screening visual arts fellow Michael Woff's The Accumulation of Capital, a film that interweaves footages of Michael's performative sorting of generations of family objects with a voiceover on capitalist accumulation, contrasting personal inheritance with economic theory. We hope you'll join us for that. And finally, tonight we're also celebrating a huge unveiling, the 65th edition of Falk's annual literary magazine, Shank Painter. Yeah. which has served as the historical record for each fellowship cohort for the last 65 years, featuring stories, poems, images of artwork by current fellows, and more. Each edition is unique, and this year's Shank Painter 65 puts the beauty and strange with great achievement. The issue is inspired by a mysterious archive discovered by chance. Fragments of a stranger's life unearthed in the snow and arranged without explanation. What has emerged with this publication is an unsettling, unresolved collection that invites readers, you, to find meaning where none is clearly given. It's a stunning accomplishment, and I'd like to thank all of those who contributed to it and give a huge, huge shout out to writing fellows Nico Amador, Ariel Miller, Robbie Herbst, and Jada Renee Allen, and our very own designer Don Zimilis for producing this year's issue. Copies are available in the back near the entrance. I highly recommend you pick one up. Please grab a copy. They're free, and although we do accept donations and welcome them. I'd like to end by inviting our fellows up on stage. And where's Devin? Devin, come up as well. Devin, my esteemed counterpart on the fellowship team.
You guys like each other at this point. We want it.
No, you guys are standing on a line. Wow, look at this. Wow. Is everyone here?
Is everybody here?
Yes. Okay. She's right there. She's right there. All right. So I'll be brief. You'll get a chance to clap again. So it's only fitting that we close Fellow Friday season with the 20 of you up here on the stage. An opportunity for all of us in this room to thank you for your contributions to Falk and Provincetown over the past 7 months. Thank you for enriching and inspiring us with your practices. Thank you for the laughs, the baked goods, your suggestions, your openness, your quirks, your smiles, the memories, for reminding us what it means to dare, to dream, and to care in community, for reminding us why we call this residency a fellowship. The world is relentless. On a constant spin cycle, one might describe as turbulent, from Mother Nature to human nature. And through or despite it all, when adversity showed up at your cohort's doorstep, you took care of each other with kindness and gentleness. And that in itself is an art form. I trust that these past 7 months are just the beginning of a long-term relationship with our artist-led institution, and hope you will continue to be among the voices that shape Falk's work in the years to come. We look forward to supporting you in the long haul, alongside the marathon journey that is the pursuit of artistic and literary creation. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. And we're grateful, I'm grateful that you chose to occupy 24 Pearl Street. So on behalf of everyone at the Fine Arts Work Center, congratulations once again on your fellowship, and please enjoy one final and resounding round of applause from this audience. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here until 8 p.m. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Fellows and Fox staff, please head to the gallery for our final group photo. Thank you.